Hello, it's Writing Wednesday. It's January 30th, I think. Terrible cold snap in the east and in the Midwest, so if you are freezing cold, are sending our love from the coast here. And it's a good time to hunker down and read. I wrote a book set in Russia, a lot of winter stuff in there. If you're looking for a mood, that might be a good choice for you. Right now, I am finishing my copy edits. I have one more week to finish copy edits for Chimes of a Lost Cathedral, the second book of The Revolution of Marina M. And so I'm back in Russia, and I'm back in the winter, and the copy editing is the state you've sent in your manuscript, you've had all your work with your editor, you've gotten into the production schedule at the publisher, so it's going to come out at a certain time, so they're working backwards of when you need this, when you need this, when you need this. So copy edits are the time you finish all the peripheral materials. So I have a couple of really beautiful maps that are going into the book. All my permissions are done. The epigraph, the beginning of the book, it's going to be a part of a Mandelstam poem. We'll Meet Again in Petersburg, very famous Mandelstam poem. And everything has to be ready. When it goes in after copy edits, what happens is you go along and they've had a copy editor go through and notice, what happened to this object that, was in the beginning, but it kind of disappeared, or look out for the smallest things. They find the smallest things. In White Oleander, they found that I'd used the same car for two different people. A book takes so long and it's so hard to get the overview that the copy editor is the one who notices all the things that you had been trying to keep track of, but maybe weren't always on top of it. So they're the ones that make sure the reader doesn't go, huh? Wasn't his name Hector? They notice things like that. So the copy editor's gone through, so their notes are in the margin. Your editor's notes are in the margin. It's track changes, so it looks like a jungle, but I have to get used to it. It used to be it was on the physical page. Now you're in track changes. You go with the program. And then all this I have to have all the pieces next Monday. It goes in. Then it will be created, the book itself, the typeset. Everything will be typeset. And then it will come back to me at the end of February. And my job will be then to just make sure everything is quite right. It's not the time to make big changes. Your pages pretty much have to stay the same length. It's a time you can change a word here and there, but the time for big changes is now. So there are places where you start reading along, and there were certain places in the manuscript that you had problems that you still hadn't satisfied to your satisfaction. You had not solved the problem. And you're reading along, you're going, wow, this is pretty good, and then boom! In the book, in the novel, during the Russian Revolution, the Russian Civil War, it was terrible. Starvation, hunger in the cities, horses dropped in the street, and they just stayed there. So there's a particular dead horse that is at the on Bolshaya Morskaya, and everybody knew where it was, but sometimes you'd forget, and under the snow, and you would fall over it. And that's what these areas of the novel are like. I thought I'd fixed it. I thought I'm going along, everything's going great, and then I fall over that same dead horse. It's like it's not quite right. And if anybody is a reader, you'll know that I'm pretty fanatic about making things right. And I just can't stand it if it's not right. So I have to pace myself. So what I'll do is I'll spend part of the day moving ahead, making sure that I'm making steady progress in the book because it is a long one again. And I don't want to fall behind on the general march forward, but because I can spend 6 weeks just dealing with this problem area and probably have multiple times. So I have to keep moving forward, and then I will break from that for the day, go back and work on that one problem area at a time, until, and maybe do that a couple of days. But right now I'm a week away. I have to gather my rewrites. There were just a couple of sections that I just wasn't satisfied with. So I have to gather those together and get them in a form where the typesetter can understand them, what I wanted. And got to make sure the beginning is right and that the ending is right. The most important play, anybody who has been watching me over time knows that the most important place in the book is the end. The most important place in the chapter is the end. The most important place in the paragraph is the end. In a scene is, you get it. So the end has to be right and the beginning has to be right. So I will be spending extra time dealing with that. So if I am not, quite as put together as I usually am, at least for this broadcast, it's because I've just been working like a madwoman. So the next thing will come back, the copy edits, the proofs will come back, which are what the pages are actually going to look like. And then just minimal changes, then that goes in, it gets typeset. Then ARCs, ARC, advanced reading copies are produced. Sometimes they have the regular cover of the book, sometimes not yet. And they're not proofread yet. So that goes out, that's why I call it a proof. That goes out to reviewers and bloggers and whoever, is going to write about it. So if you want to write about it, go ahead and write to Little Brown. And then, you'll start getting pre-publication reviews. And then the book comes out in July. So it used to be that was a year-long process. Now it takes 6 months. Amazing. The miracles of modern technology. So already have the cover, which I just love. Yay. And so that's what I've been doing with myself. Meanwhile, I have some questions from you guys, and if you think of anything, I'd be happy to answer questions. So here's a question on overwriting. That it's an interesting thing. It's like generally people are shy. Generally people just are, you're lucky to get something on the page. It's like a party. I mean, most people are shy, but every once in a while you get the guy the person who just won't stop talking. And in prose, you can kind of think of this as the overwriter. So I have a question here from Leanne. Last week's show sparked a question for me. As a poetic prose writer, how do you balance the use of metaphor? I know it's anathema to mix metaphors, but is it also possible to overuse them? What is your guideline? Love them. Thanks. So this is like most people have one problem. They're shy, they're retiring, they're, have one kind of hormonal imbalance. But there are people who have exactly the other problem. So one size never fits all. What is the rule about the overwriter? And people who like lyrical prose like I do, we like a long sentence, we like a rich sentence, we like metaphor, we're not worried about being called flowery. I don't know. I like chocolate myself. I like a rich brew. So, what can we do to keep ourselves from making the reader sick with overwriting? Too many metaphors, too rich, too colorful, just too much. And there is such a thing as overwriting. I mean, it's really important, especially if you like lush prose, to know when enough is enough, and enough can be too much. First of all, if you're in a workshop or if you're working with other people and they just say, I don't understand what you're trying to say, that's usually a sign of overwriting. You've just tried to pack every part of the sentence with too much color, too much flamboyant language. So you always have to think about going into a perfume shop or going into Bath and Body Works or something, and just the smell is so overwhelming. You just go, I don't want to eat any of this. I don't want to wear any of this. I don't want to buy any of this. This is just way too much. So how do you deal with an overwriter? One is knowing that you're overwriting. When people circle the whole sentence and they go, I can't understand what you're actually trying to say. Then you cut it down to the actual bare skeleton of the sentence. Instead of building, like I try to get most people, to build the sentence, because their sentences are usually pretty anemic and underexplored. This is trying to put every piece of jewelry in your closet onto that sentence. So take it back to the actual plain old sentence and then decide how you're going to put that sentence together. If every part of the sentence has descriptors, has adjectives, has dependent clauses, pull them out, start over, start with a simple declarative sentence, and then decide which elements of the sentence you want to build. Overwriters often can't stop it. It's like that guy, at the table. It just won't be, it just has to talk. Decide what the important element or the interesting element of that sentence is, and just choose to unpack that element. It's all about control of your language. Are you showing that you are in control, or are you in the flower shop just like grabbing huge armfuls of everything and staggering out? Show that you have control of your sentences, and pare back it's like you prune a beautiful camellia bush. You prune it into a shape. So it's not just throwing in every $4 word you can think of. Think of a simple declarative sentence, and then which part do you want to open up? That will help you. Metaphors. It's like anything else. You can't put a metaphor into every sentence. It becomes inedible. So one thing you can do, if this works well for you, is it's the old advice about jewelry. It's like dress the way you naturally feel like doing it, and then take some things off. If you tend to be an overwriter, if you tend to throw everything in, you might have to become more judicious about what you allow in the next round. Take take stuff off, and then make sure the sentences are varied. If you have long, lush sentence, make sure you have some simple, short declarative sentences. Make sure that not all parts of the sentences have those descriptors, that some of them are left elegantly themselves, unadorned, and other elements are heightened and not in the same place in every sentence. If you have an independent clause with a metaphor beginning the sentence, like so and so and so, comma, simple. The next sentence, you don't have that first introductory clause. Maybe your verb is something startling, or there'll be a metaphor later on in the sentence, or not at all. How do I feel about anathema to mix metaphors? Mixed metaphors show that you don't have control over what you're saying. You're just throwing everything in. Like when flowers grow. I have a camellia bush and it's blooming like mad, and it's kind of on my mind. So when you have a camellia or a chrysanthemum or a plant that has big flowers, you tend to prune out the side buds and allow one flower to become the big one. So same thing with overwriting. If you notice you have a lot of flowers on that stem, get rid of the ones that aren't as good. Pick the best one and leave it in. So that's my guideline. If I have two metaphors in the same sentence, it's not the best. Try to take one of them out. So don't pour chocolate all over everything. Be very judicious if you tend to like that big lush style, especially. Here's another question I had was how to tackle your own unconscious conflict. Oh, here's one. They call it dynamics in music, Linda says. They don't play every note at the same level. People get bored and wander off. Yeah. You want to have that breathing space. You want to have the simple and the complex. You want to have variety, and you want to show control over your sentences as well as your story. Now, here's another question that is a wonderful one. Illy Beth says, how to tackle your own unconscious conflict, etc., without being autobiographical. So fiction writers, how to write fiction that addresses your issues without being autobiographical. People always ask fiction writers, did this really happen? Is it based on a true story? People love that. The thing is that all art is autobiographical, but it's not autobiographical in the way that people think it is. It's not the external events that will be the autobiographical element. It will be the unconscious obsessions and fascinations. That's the inner map. It is an absolute blueprint of the writer's psyche. And those obsessions and fascinations will show up cloaked in different ways in different books or stories. So say I'm going to give you an example of when Susie was 8, she saw a woman and a man like punching it up in the street, and it really affected her. Well, if that's not personal enough to be problematic. Let me think of something more problematic. If Susie if, say, 2 of her friends were fighting in the girls' bathroom down in school, in the basement of the school. And one of the girls, 10 years old, 12 years old, takes the other one's earring and rips it out of her ear. Aha, I saw that when I was a kid. You want to use that. There is, say, you have this, you start to have this obsession with how violence can break out among people you know. And at the oddest times, you might want to give that to adults fighting, and the shock of the sudden violence, real violence that will, can open up between people you actually know, or even you and somebody else. So you give that to a character. I always say, if you have something that's very autobiographical, make sure that you change the people who it happens to. You change their hair, you change their sex, you change ethnicity, you change the town. Because the more that you can distance yourself from what actually happened, the freer you are to investigate the psychological importance of what happened. Because nobody really wants to know what a 9-year-old, what happened in the sandbox. I don't want to know that. So I give that to adults. I save the emotional impact, the psychological problem, and it will come up. It will come out. Everything that you will write should be inhabited by you. It should all be, it's like a dream. Every part of the dream is you. Make sure that you are every character. You can understand where each character is coming from. You can take your own inner conflicts and divide them out and make, this person can be all of my selfishness, and this person is going to be all my vulnerability, and this person is going to be all my curiosity. And then you set them into conflict with each other. And that's the best way to tackle your unconscious conflict without being autobiographical. Do you have tips on how to develop an objective view of my own writing without benefit of a writing group? It's like trying to see your own back without a mirror. I know there are books about self-editing and stuff, but there's nothing like a writing group or even a good reader. It doesn't have to, this person doesn't even have to be a writer. They just have to be a really good reader, and give it to them and really listen to what they're saying. And even if they're not a reader, even if they're not much of a reader, they can give you valuable information. Like I remember giving Paint It Black, which is a punk rock book, to a friend who's was a punk rocker, and just say, tell me where you put it down. Tell me when you got up and got a sandwich. Tell me, anything that you follow. I saw where she lost interest. I saw where she got a sandwich. I saw, I found out that little scene that I really thought connected, she didn't even get it. So, okay, need to bump that up so she'll get it. So yes, you need other people. Some people are native-born geniuses, but even they usually have a reader that they showed stuff. I mean, traditionally, Nabokov would show it to Vera. It was the wife who, the unaccredited editor, the unaccredited reader. But any really good reader who's willing to do it could substitute. But there's nothing like having a writer's group or just one other writer. Let's see, what else can I answer? All right. Well, that seems to be a very good, how How do you get a tough enough skin for a writing group? It's how bad do you want it? How bad do you want the information? I mean, I'm a crier. I just tell everybody I'm a crier. If I cry, so what? I need the information. Just ignore me. And, you see, you sit with your head down and you write what they're saying through your tears, and then you take it home and go, yeah, that was sort of right. Uh-huh. Because often when they're talking, you're too busy crying to really hear what they're saying. That's usually in workshop. But how tough, a skin do you need? Writing is too much work to not get that information. You're going to get reviews someday, and you talk about a tough skin. I don't know. I tell people I don't read the reviews when they come in. I have somebody else read them, my agent or my husband or friend, anybody. And if it's a bad review, or it's like, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know about it because there's nothing I can do about it right now. It's done. The book is done. If I had known that if I had known that when I was writing it, I could have done something about it. But once it's done, well, what can you do? Nothing. So what's the good in knowing? But while you're writing and you want that information, even if it hurts your feelings, so what? It's just your feelings, We all have them, but book's more important. I test out writing groups like dating until I found the right vibe. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd rather gather a writing group myself than join one. But, everybody to himself or herself. So anyway, that is a really good Writing Wednesday. We're going to stop here. Wish me luck for my copy edits. Almost done. And we'll talk to you next week. I will be done. Okay, thank you. Bye.